let's now talk about some of the rumors that we've been hearing around Kyle Lowry this week. One specific thing from Keith Pompey is that a source said Kyle Lowry would like to be in Philly. The source believes the Sixers and Raptors might be able to get something done. Toronto would most likely want some picks, young players, and veterans on expiring deals. We also saw a fake news report from an account pretending to be Joseph Zucker saying that the Raptors and Sixers were close to finalizing a deal. Obviously, no deal ended up happening. And then later in the week, we also saw a lot of things come out. Lowry's agent denied these rumors. He said there was a story about how he's pushing to go to Philadelphia, but that's just not true. And there's some transparency issues there in terms of, the original report isn't that he's pushing to go to Philly. He just believes that he would want to play in Philly potentially if he were to get traded. And that's still up in the air and probably a very probable thing considering that number one, his house is for sale here in Toronto. And number two, he's from Philadelphia. I don't see why he wouldn't want to go there in the off seasons. He's there a lot of the time. But let's just address whether or not I think this will happen. And there are three teams that have been coming up, which are the Miami Heat, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the LA Clippers. For the Clippers, they don't have the assets to make a trade, so let's just keep them out of the conversation. The next team that's I think could make an interesting package are the Miami Heat. They were not interested in putting Tyler Hero in a James Harden trade, which in my mind means they're definitely not putting him in a trade for Kyle Lowry. So take their best asset off the table. Duncan Robinson is also probably not a guy you'd be able to acquire for Kyle Lowry. So take that off the table as well, just from what I'm hearing around the league. That leaves you with Precious Achiuwa and maybe a pick, as well as cap filler with Olynyk and Iguodala as a potential trade package. And I think for Toronto, you'd be okay with that haul because when you look at their core moving forward, you've already got a good wing in OG Anunoby. You got another good forward in Pascal Siakam. You got Van Vliet at the head as a point guard. You got Malachi Flynn and Terrence Davis as a couple interesting young guards, as well as Jalen Harris, who's a bit bigger and might be able to slot in at the shooting guard position as a guy who can just get buckets off the bench. So Toronto's got a lot of guards in their future that they can potentially work with. So it'd be nice to add a guy like Precious who you can play at the 5. He's a rim runner. He's athletic. It's a good fit for Toronto, and I would actually personally like this trade. As a Kyle Lowry fan, I don't want to see him not in Toronto because he's just an amazing guy. Like, there's no question about it. He's the heart and soul of this team. You're lowering your ceiling of winning this season, or at least going far. In an Eastern Conference that feels pretty open. Boston hasn't got going this year. Obviously, Marcus Smart is injured, one of the heart guys on their team, but with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they're looking like a really solid team, but they're just losing games because they're not getting anything else from anyone else. And Kemba Walker's been really good as well. Obviously has been struggling this year, but he's been good in the past. So we'll see what they can get going there. I think they're still a very challenging team to play if you were to meet them in a playoff series. But, with Miami being up and down this year, is still definitely in the conversation and have a move to make going into the trade deadline. As well as the Nets obviously being the favorite in the East, but the Bucks not looking great so far this year. It feels a little wide open where Toronto could win a first round series if they have a good matchup, and then in a second round, it's 50-50. So if Toronto does want to keep Kyle Lowry, that would increase their chances of going further in the playoffs. Can they win a title with this roster? Not really. So under that assumption, maybe it's a better choice as a basketball team to make a move for him, get assets for your future, give him to a team like Philadelphia who, all these teams could use Kyle Lowry. You add him to any team in the NBA, and that makes them a better team automatically. Just because he's easy to fit in, he plays defense, he's a guy who plays with a lot of heart, he'll draw a lot of charges. I think he's a good fit on most every team. Miami Heat have assets. Philadelphia 76ers have assets, so let's talk about what Philadelphia could offer. And here's a potential package I've heard getting floated around. So first of all, you need cap filler, so it's got to be Mike Scott. I want Tony Bradley because he's a young center, 23 years old. Put him in there and put in Danny Green as cap filler. Danny Green back to Toronto. Why not? So that's your cap fill. And out of those three guys, only one really plays regular minutes, which is Danny Green. And you're going to be swapping with Kyle Lowry. And then add Tyrese Maxey, who is a young guard who can potentially take the reins moving forward for Toronto. He's shown promise. And then a pick. I think that's a really good haul in return for Kyle Lowry. And for the 76ers, you get to compete now. You get a guy who is from Philly, will likely sign longer term with them, even though he's older. He's got a Chris Paul feel to him, even though Lowry's not quite as good as Chris Paul. He's still got that feel. He's a leader. He plays good defense. He can reduce your turnovers, which is something that Philadelphia has always struggled with, and this year is another one of the worst teams taking care of the ball, and Lowry would definitely improve that. You add shooting around Joel Embiid, and you can feed him every time down the floor. And you've got a big four of Kyle Lowry, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. The funny thing, though, about Kyle Lowry and Ben Simmons together is they've had some beef in the past. They had a scuffle where they were going to meet back in the locker room and, hash it out, but that never ended up happening. You got the play where Ben Simmons elbows Kyle Lowry in the groin area, and in the playoffs, right? I think that was Game 3 of the 2019 playoffs second round series. Obviously, the Game 7 thriller that we all remember, but that's a play that also happened. So it'd be interesting to see those two playing on the same team. I don't know how it would work, but personally, as a Raptors fan, I would not want to see him go, but I do understand the intrigue of trading him if there's a possibility he leaves at the trade deadline. Sorry, not at the trade deadline, but trading him at the trade deadline, because there's a possibility he leaves in the off season. And this applies too for a guy like Norman Powell, who's on the last year of his contract as well. I would like to sign him longer term. At 27, he's a good fit around this core as well. As a six-man coming off the bench, he can play the two, play a forward-ish position as well if you're running a smaller lineup. And he obviously provides instant offense for a team, so there are probably going to be some suitors for him if you do want to trade him and try and build a bit younger than you currently are. Around Siakam, obviously, at 27, and Van Vliet at 27, you can start building that core with a younger core underneath it with OG and those guys. Malachi Flynn, obviously, and build up this really good team that would be very interesting over the next 5 to 10 years.